You were probably as well. Not only was I pretty stunned by the tactless nature of the Kennedy ad, but there were also multiple ads for Jesus in the Super Bowl, which I think it tells you a lot about how things are going as far as attendance in church, as does the response, the instantaneous response that took place in real time on social media to those ads, which, there is the one about, Jesus washing the feet. And immediately the narrative was that Jesus had a foot fetish. And just think about that for a second. Just think about the nature of that, it's a vast majority of the country openly was mocking these ads. When I was a kid in the early 80s, you never would mock Christianity. You just wouldn't. If you did, you kind of were run out of town. I mean, there were people that would do critical analysis of like Mother Teresa or the Pope, and they're, how dare you? The Life of Brian, the Monty Python guys were blasphemized nationwide for daring to do a movie which they determined mocked and ridiculed Jesus, which is, by the way, as a person who's a Christian, absolutely hilarious. Life of Brian. That is a good movie, although, yeah, we got some questions with John Cleese in costume early on. Anyway, you just didn't do that. And the fact that there wasn't, I didn't see any. Well, isn't it great they're talking about Jesus in the ads during the Super Bowl? Didn't see any of that. It gives me some time to break down something which the folks in Minneapolis, St. Paul know. Chicago, you probably haven't heard me go through this, maybe bits and pieces over the last few months, but let me take some time to talk about religion and my religion, because I'm talking about it from my perspective. Now, let me predicate this with my usual disclaimer. You do or don't do whatever it is you do or don't want to do. I am Christian. Used to be Catholic, but I left the Catholic Church not that long ago. I have found myself a lovely little Lutheran church, which seems to be far more in line with the teachings of Jesus than what we were seeing before. We were Catholic. As a matter of fact, my wife and I had a very strong relationship with church, which is always one of these reasons why I've always been I always kind of laugh at the idea of, you need to teach church in school. Well, no, every church I know is open pretty much 7 days a week, maybe 6. And you want your kids to have as much church in them as they want. That's on you. You don't want to get off your lazy butt and take them down there. So you're looking for other people to raise your kids as you want in other venues. And that's not your job. If you don't want to raise your kids, fine, that's your call, but don't expect other people to do it for you. It's that. And that's kind of one of the things I've mentioned, because my kids, we did the Catholic Church shuffle, first communion, baptized, first communion. They basically go through and get confirmed. All 3 of them have been confirmed in the church. And yeah, it was, something that was an integral part of our lives. And no, unlike the evangelicals who support Trump, who I don't know if you saw that poll that said most of them do not go to church but once or twice a year, we've always been regular churchgoers. Was at church yesterday. It was actually quite a lovely little service. I go to church probably 3 to 4 times a month. We like it. I got a great, like I said, the church I'm at right now, the music in that church is amazing. And that's a Lutheran church. I know usually it's a little somber in the Lutherans. You guys at Westwood do an amazing job with music. It's fantastic. We came back. We got married at a Catholic church in town back in 97. And when we moved back to Minneapolis, St. Paul, we immediately started going on a regular basis to that church. And of course, the first real big conflict we had was the Catholic Church child sex scandal, which was horrible. And for us, religion, if you choose to partake in it or not, that's up to you. Once again, disclaimer, you do or don't do whatever it is you do or don't want to do. But religion, Christianity is, and I think religion is an individual relationship. What kind of kept us in the Catholic Church during that crisis was the belief that in our church, it had nothing like that had even happened. There was no cover-ups in our church. There was nothing like that. And for the most part, that's, we were there. I felt fairly secure that the Diocese of St. Paul, was also fairly clean. Unfortunately, that we did find out later on there was someone who was being shifted around. But I remember back in the 2000s, the first decade, that we'd go to church, and there was one time we went to church, and all of a sudden there's like a third of the people there. I mean, it was just empty. And I'm like, my wife said, "Is it a holiday? Do I not know?" She's shrugging her shoulders. I was shrugging my shoulders. We didn't know. We end up not seeing most people for a while, and just what it was then they finally addressed it. They said, "Yeah, there's a lot of people who have left because of the child sex scandal, and we keep telling them it's not us, but there." Now, some people did come back. Some of them did. But for the most part, for a long time, we went from a full church, and that was a big church, and it was full, to a third to a half full for many years. For the people in Chicago back in 2012 in Minnesota, the Republicans tried to pass a anti-gay marriage amendment to the Constitution. And it was encouraged by the diocese quite a bit. Now, mind you, at the same time, the Republicans were trying to pass an anti-immigrant driver's license amendment or a law. I can't remember what exactly it was. And the diocese were also against that, but you never heard them talk about that. That was more of a protest in the silence of our hearts because they didn't want to upset their conservatives. But they were front and center on the, we have to stop this scourge that is gay marriage. And it didn't go well for them. They lost, and they lost badly. I mean, in the weeks leading up to it, the vote, they were putting out ads up here that were, "We don't hate anybody, but we don't want you to have the same rights as us," which, sounds like hate to me and to most of the people in Minnesota as well. We were at our church, and the priest, now I'm going to be honest with you, our church was a fairly liberal Catholic church. It was a fairly liberal one. And the priest comes on out and he says, "I have been told by the diocese to tell you how to vote." And he says, "I am not going to do that. You are intelligent people. You and vote how you feel is fit. Leave me out of it." He got a standing ovation, by the way, by the parish, the congregation that day. And yeah, that was one of those things where I appreciated that leadership. And once again, the anti-gay marriage amendment in Minnesota did fail back in 2012. There had been Neinstead, the archbishop of the diocese. He ended up leaving under a bit of a shadow. Yeah. Hebda took over. And overall, there was this movement to more of a conservative church experience over the last, say, 10 years or so before we left, which it was little things, but I mean, it was definitely, there was a push towards a more conservative thing. But then it was the Conference of Catholic Bishops. And this is basically the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is this group of bishops that basically they're conservative. And the Catholic Church in the United States is far more conservative than it is in most other places on the planet. And they and a lot of this, and I've talked about this, is that if you go to individual parishes and this, the primary benefactor in a lot of those places is a conservative. And they basically have been pushing the church to be far more conservative. And like a lot of churches, you go to a lot of Catholic churches, and I've been to Catholic churches where it didn't matter what the service was about. It didn't matter what the reading was about. The entire thing was gay people are evil and abortion is horrible. And that was it. And if you're not on board with us, you're going to burn. And that was it. That was their narrative. Hate, 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 hate. And they tried their hardest to try to paint this as something more than it was. But it was just hate, 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 hate. Well, the Conference of Catholic Bishops came on out, and this was something I've talked about at length because this was the final straw for us. Joe Biden is the second Catholic president we've ever had. You would think the Catholic Church would be somewhat happy to have a devout Catholic man in the White House, as opposed to his predecessor, who basically didn't know how to even hold a Bible upright. He doesn't go to church, doesn't do it. My God, he's a biblical villain. And yet the Catholic Church loved him, and it was embarrassing. So the Conference of Catholic Bishops goes on out there, and initially they say, we're going to rein that Joe Biden in, and we're going to tell him that you can't have communion and all these things. Well, that didn't go over well. It didn't go over well with me, a lot of other people, because this clearly was a political thing. And the Conference of Catholic Bishops realized they'd overstepped and immediately came out and was like, well, this isn't about any one particular person. This isn't about one political party. This is about just having a standard. But the thing that they could not help themselves from doing was running out to the cameras and going, my parishioners want that Joe Biden reined in. George Bailey is a menace, that sort of thing, the Potter thing. And they couldn't help themselves. They would sit there and say to you to your face, this has nothing to do with Joe Biden, and then run out to their local media saying, we're doing everything to hold Joe Biden accountable. Well, that was the final straw for a lot of us. I left my church, and so did a lot of other people. We talked about this extensively on the air up here in the Twin Cities, where we talked about people were saying that, oh, yeah, that in some of their churches, they had seen yet another massive exodus, that they were down in some of these larger churches to less than 100 people per mass, which that has never been there. And it's not just this exodus from these churches is not just a Catholic thing. It is not just something that happened with the Catholic faith. No, when you turn a religion that's supposed to be based on love, peace, compassion, and welcoming, and turn it into, here's who you need to hate. They're all demon people. This crap line of hate the sin, love the sinner. No. That's you basically implying the sin, and your applications basically imply that you somehow are Jesus on earth and you can ridicule and criticize. No, that's not what you're doing. If you're not, and by the way, for the people that do this, you haven't read the dang Bible, because the Bible says, it tells you exactly who Jesus hung out with, and all the people you constantly condemn, Jesus would have been hanging out with them the entire time. It's just a fact. Nope. They basically pushed us out the door. And that was it. We said, okay, fine, we're not welcome. And once again, it was not our church. Our church was lovely. I loved my church. This was a hard decision because I loved my church. And I don't think the priests that were there, who I've had some of the greatest life lessons from just by sitting in a church service on a Sunday and listening to them, that they weren't on board with this either in any capacity. But yeah, we left, tried a few different faiths, ended up with the Lutherans, found a very welcoming, peaceful, compassionate, and loving parish there. I'll finish talking about this when I come back. It's the Matt McNeil Show.
Spike heels, no skin tight jeans. I've got a fistful of love that's coming your way, baby. Spike heels, no skin tight jeans. I've got a fistful of love that's coming your way, baby. Spike heels, no skin tight jeans.
It's the Matt McNeil Show on a Monday. By the way, can I say one thing about the Super Bowl, which was great? Joe Biden trolling the right with the image that he released afterwards with his dark Brandon glowing red eyes saying, just as I drew it up. Matty Likey, do more there, Joe. Do more. I made the point. I just said, hey, yeah, it was just as, you know, as Joe Biden called it, Mahomes to Taylor Swift for the touchdown. Everyone gets a Bud Light, you know, and just, yeah, just to 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. So just finishing up the story here on religion and getting back to these ads, these religious ads here. After we left our church, our priest called us up and he said, would you mind meeting? Got him, Father Byron. And Father Byron, he said, would you mind meeting? Because I would love to talk with you about this and just kind of get some more insight into it. Because he said a lot of people had left the parish, had left the church. And so I met with him, and my wife and I both met with him. We had coffee and we talked it over, and he just sort of said, yeah, this is, you know, he goes, and he said, and God bless him, he's passed away. It's very sad, but he did say to us at the time, he says, I'm very concerned about where the Catholic Church is going, because he's gone to the seminary, and the people that are controlling the seminary are only basically teaching two things. And this is his story as he's relating to me. He's saying that they were being taught to hate gay people and that abortion is the only sin that needs to be addressed. And that's it. And he himself said he would talk to young, priests coming out of the seminary and saying, what about, feeding the hungry and taking care of the sick? And they would say the same thing. It's like, all that stuff is great. And yes, I'm 100% for them, those things. But if those things need to be sacrificed for the other issues, that's the priority. He said there is pretty much every priest coming out of the seminary now. This is his statement to me, is this far right priest who is only echoing right-wing political Trump talking points. He didn't know where the church was going to go. Like I said, I found a nice little Lutheran church that I've enjoyed quite a bit, and my family goes there on a pretty much a weekly basis. We volunteered. As a matter of fact, we're now in the process of becoming members there. The Pastor Jason over there was after my back got broken by the drunk driver a year plus ago. He was just spectacular in his support and reaching out and seeing how I was doing. And yeah, feels like I found a home. Feels like it's peace, welcoming, caring, and compassion and love. It doesn't surprise me you guys have to advertise now in the Super Bowl to try to get people to walk into your churches. But there is no one else to blame. There is no video game or heavy metal music. There is no counterculture. There's no liberal that's doing it. You guys need to look in the mirror. Because even the people that want to be religious can't take this forced political narrative that you guys jam down people's throats. I have a friend that moved to outstate Minnesota, and the first day they went into church, they were like, "Oh, we're such a welcoming parish. We're such a welcoming church. We're so welcoming, welcoming." She looked forward to it. She gets in there. As soon as the second the gospel is done, all of a sudden it's this: if you're not hating gay people. And she left. And as she was leaving, she was, he was like, I'm sorry, this is not what I wanted. So, but we're so welcome. The guy said, we're so welcome. She goes, no, you're not. Listen to what he's saying. You're literally pushing people out of the church. Not gently either, with force. And it doesn't matter how many ads you run in the Super Bowl. If I walk into a church and you tell me, no, all that stuff in the Gospels, ignore that. Ignore that. We're going to talk about how great Donald Trump is. You lost us. You've lost us. And it used to be, I remember when churches used to avoid political contests like the plague because they didn't want to be seen as political. And now, there are many denominations in this country that can't help but get into bed with the political organizations because they've become addicted to the power they perceive that they get from having political allies or a seat at the political table. But yet then they sit there and they wonder, why are the pews nearly as empty, don't have nearly as many people in them? How come every person that graduates high school seems to leave and never come back once their parents aren't dragging them to church? Have you tried being nice? Dead serious. Have you tried being nice? Have you tried not being judgmental? Have you tried not thinking of ways you can say, you're a sinner? Have you tried saying, you know what? I'm a Christian. That tells me I'm supposed to love and care for every person, regardless of whether I believe with the things that they stand for or not. So welcome on in. And we'll just go with that. Done talking. Have you tried being nice? That's not something you can fix with a few Super Bowl ads. And like I said, the reaction to those ads tells you how much trouble organized religion in this country is in right now. Because, like I said, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, no one would have badmouthed even a religious ad they didn't agree with. They would just, okay, well, that's just, they have the right, and off they go, and that's good things. And the villainy that came on off of those ads. And once again, I think the people's hearts, Mark Wahlberg and the other, your hearts are in the right place. But maybe, as opposed to trying to go out there and spend millions of dollars to convince people to come into church, why don't you give them a reason to come into church? We're welcoming. We don't care who you are. You're welcome here. This is a condemnation-free zone. We are not going to take our personal dislikes, wrap them in a gospel, and act like we're being pious because we're criticizing you from behind a thin veil of gospel. Try being nice.